the man behind Media Mint. Next slide. So he'll talk about the growth lessons while building a 1,500 people company. So look forward to this. Next slide, Sandeep. And to ask and grill to a certain extent, Aditya, we have Rashida Adenwala, our Vice President of TI Hyderabad. She's also the founder and partner of RNA Associates, which are in the company secretarial and legal work. Next slide. So about our speaker, Aditya, he's been a serial entrepreneur, having started successfully and scaled companies over the past 10 years. Media Mint, Zipper, and Doosra are some of them. He's an alumnus of Hyderabad Public School, CBIT, and the West Virginia University. And in 2010, he co-founded Media Mint, which is now a successful 1,500 plus people marketing operation that works with some of the largest ad agencies and publishers globally. And the interesting part is he recently exited Media Mint to Brightcom in a successful cash per stock deal of a significant 566 crores. There's a lot of excitement about this. His ventures have provided direct and indirect employment to over 2,000 people in the last 10 years. He is a seed stage investor with the philosophy of investing patient capital in 3 firms in the last few years. One firm which he successfully exited in 2018. Aditya is also an active athlete, playing school and college level lawn tennis during his early years. So a well-rounded personality of education, entrepreneurship, as well as an athlete. Next slide. Yeah, so before we go on, just some general ground rules for the participants. All attendees in the meeting are requested not to access cameras or microphones throughout the session. Please use the chat option to ask any question to the speakers. Your questions will be taken up by the moderator to ask the panelists. If you have any trouble with audio, try checking your internet connection or seek help from the host. So I've set the guidelines, the ground rules, and over now to Rashida and Aditya. Rashida, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you, Srinivas, and a very warm welcome to you, Aditya, and a warm welcome to all our members who are here today. First of all, thank you all very much for your participation. And I'm sure that, there's a lot to learn from today's talks. So looking forward to a very interactive session. Please put your queries in chat box, as this is the best opportunity to learn from somebody who has, made it right from scratch to exit, and a very successful exit. So, and also being a serial entrepreneur, I'm sure he has had his own challenges and, learning, so which we all could learn from. So thank you very much, Aditya, for your time, and really appreciate. So, obviously, the fact that you have, right from 2010 when you started your venture, but before that, you had a 5-year stint again, where you worked with a startup, that is Fusion, Tribal Fusion. So just, getting straight and hitting it straight out, I would like to ask you, is that what was your stint, that 5-year stint at Tribal Fusion, which actually, wherein you played multiple roles and responsibilities, and through your contribution, Tribal Fusion actually scaled up from an employee base of 25 to 400 in just 5 years, and, also expanded its operations to 10 plus countries. So that, and which also includes India. So that must have been a really, really great, start for you, which gave you the insights of how, you start your own entrepreneurial journey. So maybe a little about your first step.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Rashida. So yeah, I think the 5 years, the first 5 years of my professional journey have been with an ad tech company. But interestingly, I think a lot of the seeds of entrepreneurship for me have been kind of sown very early on, right? As you mentioned, I think as Vasu mentioned, I graduated from Hyderabad Public School. And the year that I had passed out, we had the 75-year celebrations of HPS. And at that time, I was an 18-year-old kid, very, very emotional about having left school And there was this brilliant opportunity to sort of give back to the institution that same year. So what ended up happening is there was this huge event being planned for 75 years, and I participated as one of the youngest volunteers. So there were about, I think, 15 or 16 other people that were already part of the organizing committee. And sort of I volunteered to be a part of it. And that experience where I was the editor for the magazine that got launched, as well as did everything from sticking stickers on cars across the city of Hyderabad, making sure that I sold tickets at petrol pumps. All of these, sort of give you a little bit of a kick. And for me, that is when I felt that if you did something out of the box, there's a lot more excitement around it. So for me, really, the seeds of doing something different, doing something enterprising, really started off with right after school. We did something really interesting. Me and a whole bunch of friends in CBIT as well. We did the first edition of now, which is a very famous college fest called Carpe Diem. So I was the president of the student body, and there were about 80 of us that sort of worked together and put this whole event together. And for me, all of these experiences that I had even while growing up, almost sort of told me that I had to really go in and explore my full potential by working in something that helped build an enterprise. So I was very lucky when I was in the US to work for this company, Tribal Fusion. It happened very much by accident, where a friend of mine was working, and he said, "Hey, there seems to be a sales assistant role available in this young startup." And at that point, I didn't know what digital marketing was about at all. And I said, I knew I didn't want to go into the engineering line of work. So I said, why not? I'll give it a shot. And it was basically the assistant to the VP of sales. And I ended up learning a whole lot about how digital marketing worked in those first couple of years. And then I moved on to other roles. I played the role of a product manager. And then eventually I moved to India in 2009 because the company was scaling up very rapidly. And after the 2008 financial crisis, they wanted to sort of be more efficient about how they run their operations. And we decided that we're going to scale operations for Tribal Fusion in India. And I sort of put my hand up and said, hey, I'll go and help sort of bootstrap it or set it up. And that was sort of really my first foray coming back into India. And, that then led into, starting Media Mint in 2010.
Wow, that's that in the, so that means you have had that entrepreneurial kick with you right from, when you were, growing up. So that's really exciting. So, but what made you think that, Media Mint, and especially marketing, did you see that there was a proper product market fit available at that time for Media Mint, to having started this marketing company and get into digital marketing? Especially when, everything at that time, there was this whole collapse in 2009, 2010. So what made you take this step?
It's actually very interesting, for me, I'd sort of come back from, I'd sort of quit Tribal Fusion in early 2010. And me and a couple of friends, Nilima, myself, and two other friends, we basically decided to get in the restaurant business. And it was very interesting because we were sort of just come back. We had just sort of come back from the US, and we were very naive about what kind of business we should get into. So then we looked at all domains and said, "Restaurant mein paisa hai." Everybody says that a lot of margin in restaurants. So we sort of got into it like 4 engineers would, right? Without really thinking about the fact that food is a variable product. How you source for your chefs and all of that was extremely complex. And not surprisingly, within 8 months, we kind of shut shop because we realized, we could not be doing this for the next 15 years and be very excited about it. Going and eating at good restaurants and enjoying food doesn't mean you can go out and become a food sort of entrepreneur, right? They're very, very different things. But then once we shut it down, that's when panic set in, really, Rashida. Where we quit our really well-paying jobs in the US, both Nilima and myself. And now we are in this state where, we don't know what to do next. So then I told Nilima, basically, we'll give ourselves a month, right? And let me sort of, because I think I've built a good network in the US. So let me go back there and spend some time talking to the folks, because if we've decided to stay back in India, and the only thing that I knew was digital marketing, let's see if we can build a business out of it. So And for me, I was very fortunate to have our first two sort of customers being ex-colleagues of mine that said, "Acha, you know what? We believe that you will sort of go in and potentially scale our operations." And that's how Media Mint started. So it didn't start with this grand plan that, hey, let's get into digital marketing because it's a huge space. But over the years, we kind of realized, I think the first 1 or 2 years, we realized that we were basically sitting on a massive market opportunity, because a lot of money was moving from traditional advertising to digital advertising. And there weren't enough people that understood how to run these campaigns. So we knew that there was a severe talent shortage globally. And with our sort of background and having sort of seen how to build an operation from a really small startup to the scale that Tribal Fusion went to, gave me enough confidence that we could give it a serious shot.
Excellent. Great. So by the way, just to let all of you know, Nilima also happens to be his life partner and also co-founder of Media Mint. And that's how the two of them started this journey together. So, I mean, obviously, as we discussed that, you have, Media Mint was totally bootstrapped and you did not raise any funding whatsoever. And yet you managed to scale up to such an organization up to 1,500 employees. So can you just talk to us through how did step by step, how did you manage to scale up? And, I mean, how did you strategize? How did you plan your funding, for the benefit of all?
Yeah, so I think, I get asked this question a lot, but really at that point of time, there was no real sources of funding to spoil us, right? I mean, we had to sort of make it for ourselves. In 2010, there weren't any early stage, accelerators, incubators, VCs, they didn't exist at the time. So it was really about, if we wanted to do something for ourselves, we had to find a way to grind it out. But I think what really helped us is when I think about it, are three things, Rashida. One is the fact that, because I had experience in the space, and as a product manager, I had the good fortune of working with a lot of senior executives in the US, right? And my company, for whatever reason, was a good revolving door for a lot of senior execs that would come, spend 6 months and leave. But because I was the product manager, always got a chance to interact with them. So I was able to build a relationship with a lot of my ex-colleagues while I was at Tribal Fusion. So I think that helped a whole lot, because as I said, our first two clients came in not because we had a company, but because they believed that, they believed in the kind of way that I would work, and said that, if we gave the opportunity to Aditya, then he will sort of ensure that, he's able to deliver. So I think the first piece was being able to build up that credibility, which then allowed us to have our first 2 checks before we even started the company. So for us, customer advances were what really sort of helped us, kick things off. Obviously, we had to put in a couple of lakhs ourselves just to get tables, chairs, couple of computers and stuff like that. But that was really it. The second thing was, because we had spent some time in the US, we were able to get some savings together, which allowed us to sort of handle our personal finances and personal expenses without having to worry on the day-to-day. So a lot of times when people talk about, and now you have early stage capital that is available, at that point it wasn't. So while a lot of people say that you go in and build a business, but they don't talk about the fact that you need to have enough comfort on the personal finance front to be able to do it. So that was the second one. And the third one was, over the years, we never really took money out of the company. I used to hear a lot of other companies, a lot of other friends, whatever, right? So on year one, you make some profit, you draw out dividends, whatever, right? So we kept all of the money in the company, at least for the first, I think, 6 years. Never, and we were profitable from quarter one. We were never unprofitable through our entire lifetime. But we wanted to make sure that all of that money was kept back in the company for further growth, right? A lot of people asked us, why didn't you invest in, a lot of people bought office space and stuff like that, right? We don't own a single square foot of office space, because we felt that that's not the business. We are not in the real estate business. So let's make sure that we are able to put in all of the profits that were being generated. We plow back into sort of growing the business itself. So I think these are 3 or 4 things that really helped us, stay profitable, ensure that we had cash flows going, and didn't really see the need to raise external capital.
Excellent. So this was a very interesting point, making sure that your personal, you have enough finances to take off your personal care. So at least that tension is off, and, you can focus and concentrate on the business. So I think this is a very, very valid and an important point for all of, because this is where most of the struggle happens. Taking customer advances and working on that, and, not taking money out of the company, that also, I think, is something which is an interesting point to note. So that's great. But I'm sure that, everything is never, there's never an upward thing. There's always, ups and downs and a lot of challenges that would have come through while you were scaling up. So could you throw some lights on some of the challenges or your learnings, which could help, other startups to, at least understand that what could go wrong and how does one set it right, going?
Yeah, no, I think there are two pieces to this, Rashida, that I'd like to focus on. One is, a lot of times people talk about what we did, right? What a company did. But a lot of times, the company, in my view, the journey of the company is defined by what we decided not to do, right? And those end up defining a lot more than what you ended up doing, because distractions
Right.
are a big part of any business, right?
True.
So I think there are 3 or 4 things that we decided not to do that I think helped us tremendously keep our focus over the years. The first thing that happened, this was back in 2012, where Google was sort of scaling up their operation center in Hyderabad significantly, right? And I knew a bunch of people at Google, both in Mountain View as well as here, and they were like, hey, you know what? And that time we were a 30 people company, right? Really small. And Google basically came in and said that, hey, would you like to help staff about 50 to 60 people for us in our offices? Right. At that point of time, we said, no, we're not a staffing company. We're not going to be doing that. If you as Google want us to handle your marketing operations, let us know. We'd be happy to take that up as a business. Google said, no, that's not a direction that we're going to go. And we decided to part ways, right? So, and at that point of time, in a 30 people company, and you have an opportunity to build up almost triple the size of your company, and saying no to that, I think was very pivotal for us. Because that helped us establish our own brand and how we operate, allowed us to sort of, build our own culture and the way that we would go about operationalizing things. So that was the first one. The second thing that we did is we decided, and this I learned it out of, we ran an early stage in 2011. We ran a campaign for one of the real estate companies in India, and we ran it for like a month or so, and I didn't get paid for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, I basically I asked for my money, and they basically said, "Hey, we're going to pay you your money, but will you give us a 10% discount?" And at that point of time, I realized that the Indian sort of digital marketing ecosystem was still not. I could not afford it. Let me put it that way. As a bootstrap company, I could not afford to not be paid. For 6 months. So cash flow became very, very important, right? And the being able to work with US, in the US market meant that you'd get paid, on time. And if they didn't pay you in 30 days, and if you're net 30, this thing on 31st day, they would apologize and pay you, right? So very different kind of culture compared to India. So we decided to not focus on the Indian market, even though everybody kept saying that the Indian market is exploding. The third thing that we did is we said no early stage to in our early days to outsource product development. So a lot of people said, hey, now that you have this entire setup, why don't you hire a few engineers and sort of help us scale our product development efforts like any other IT company would. And we said no to that. We said we want to focus on marketing operations because that is our strength. Product development is not our strength, so we'd like to not sort of focus there. So we left money on the table there as well. And the last piece was, until we really established ourselves in the US market, we decided not to go into any other country as well. So I had experience sort of setting up, operations for Australia, for the UK. So while there were salespeople in those markets, I was responsible at Tribal Fusion for setting up the back office operations for these countries as well. So it was very natural for me to look at UK as well as Australia. And we decided not to do that because there was enough headroom in the US. So these are some of the things that we decided not to do, which I think helped keep our focus in what we were doing as a business. Now, in terms of a couple of mistakes that we did as we went along, and this is a little bit more personal to me as well, which is, there was all of this talk in 2010, 12, 13, that if you're a services company, you are looked down upon, right? And if you're a product company, then you're awesome. there was this very clear sort of step treatment given to services companies, even though they were driving huge amounts of export revenue for the country. And I kind of bought into that. I drank that Kool-Aid and said, if somebody would ask me, what do you do? And by that time I'd started Zipper, and I would only tell them about that I was running Zipper. I would almost very sheepishly not even mention MediaMint. And for me, looking back, that was one of the most disrespectful things I had done for MediaMint in the early years, right? So when I look at my personal mistake, it is not showing enough respect to the basic fundamentals of a business, right? Which is being able to run a company, hire employees, have the right kind of cash flow, these kind of things. So that was one mistake that I sort of felt that I had corrected over the years. The other was reliance on one or two clients very early on in our business. For most of our business, I think 70% of our business for the first 3 years came from 2 clients. If I had to sort of redo it, I'd probably figure out a mitigation strategy as we went along. But that was another piece. And the last piece was, over the years, and we've sort of seen about 2,000, 2,500 people in my journey. We had some sort of wrong hires, right? Toxic people that had joined the organization. I think we let some of them hang on for too long. And while the signs were very clear that we should have made moves early on, we did not, because I was a little too timid to make those moves. So I think these were some of the mistakes that we had made along the way. But luckily, we didn't have to pay very heavily for those mistakes. But it could very easily have been a very different outcome.
So I mean, very interesting. And this is really good in terms of, having the ability to say no, especially when things are very luring also. So, I mean, this is something which is a very interesting, and people should realize that many a times we do get lured with, something which comes our way and says, why not, let's try it. And then we lose focus. So staying focused, and exactly that you want this, and having stayed focused on doing only marketing, as you said, and not getting to product development and get lured by that. Maybe that is what has finally led you to where you are today. So very interesting, and a very important learning also, to stay focused, number one, and number two, saying no when that, okay, fine, however it may be, or it may add to your revenues or something, but if that's not what you want to do, and especially which may hamper your brand or hamper your things. So I mean, obviously Google being massive, and anybody can said, fine, why not collaborate. So I mean, really, I would say that that's appreciable, and for being able to do this thing, especially when you were at such an early stage. So great. I mean, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of questions which will come forth from the audience, and they would be waiting for the questions. So maybe I will, another 10-15 minutes more we'll spend on your other the other ventures that made you start Zipper and Doosra. And then also I would like to learn something more about your exit strategy. So maybe first let's talk about, what made you go into the other ventures, or what is that pain points that you see around which led you to start Zipper, and then of course Doosra.
Yeah, no, I think for me, both Zipper and Doosra came out of personal pain points. Zipper came out of when I was visiting from the US. At that time, Meru Cabs had just launched, and I was really in love with Meru Cabs because they were just doing just a phenomenal job, because before them taxis did not exist, right, in any sort of formal way. And I was sort of shuttling between Delhi and Hyderabad Monday through Friday, and I used to call for a Meru Cab at 4:30 in the morning because I needed to take a 6 o'clock flight. And mind you, this was back in 2009, 10, during that time frame, right, where there was no Google Maps, no real apps and stuff like that. And I remember very clearly that I would give directions to Meru Cabs when I was booking the cab the night before, and then next day morning, as soon as I would go into the shower, the driver would call, and I had to rush out to sort of give him directions, right? And I did that a couple of times, and I'm like, there has to be a better way than this. Each time I cannot have to explain directions to 100 different people. So how can we sort of have some way where I can put all my instructions at one place, and then they figure it out. So that sort of formed the basic thesis of Zipper, which is, it's basically a short code for locations that you don't have, so that you don't have to repeat your instructions again and again, right? Obviously now things are very, very different. There's a lot more, you can share your location on WhatsApp and stuff like that. So during the Zipper journey, we initially started off on the consumer side, and a very hard problem to solve because we are defining our own address format, which meant that consumers needed to create a zipper code for themselves. And then we needed to have enough businesses that would accept a zipper code. So we failed to sort of get that flywheel going for multiple reasons, but primarily because we were, as a B2C business, we needed to raise a lot more capital to be able to get that flywheel going, and we weren't able to do that. So then we pivoted into working with the government. So today, Zipper's developed an end-to-end addressing system where we work with municipalities to provide a digital address to every home, and we're live in about 115 cities across the country. So that was sort of the Zipper story, where you take a personal pain point and figure out a way, how do you solve that for a large market like India. Has had its challenges. Working with the government is not easy, but I think we've seen some success there. Second is Doosra, very, very similar sort of story, where when I say similar story, the personal pain point. I walked into a shopping goods store. I can probably tell in this audience it was Decathlon, and I don't know if any of you guys have been to Decathlon. The guy will refuse to bill if you don't give your mobile number. And this was in 2016, and I came from a digital marketing background where I knew that once you give your mobile number, they're able to tag that to whatever your Facebook ID is and do a lot of cross-pollination of data. And I was very, very uncomfortable with that idea. And I said, hey, I'm paying you with cash. Why do I need to pay you? Why do I need to give you my mobile number? And they said something silly like, sir, when you need to return it, we need your mobile number. I said, I'll bring my bill back to you. So if you have my proof of purchase, you don't need my mobile number. So anyway, that day, I decided not to buy from them. I walked away empty-handed. But that sort of gave me the idea that, we all should have a second number that is not our personal number. So I went and got myself another SIM card that day, and I started using that second number for 4 or 5 years. But then I realized that it's a very clunky experience. Let's say this is my second phone. Every time I want an OTP from it, it's either not charged or not with me. Right. So then, we said, is there a better way to solve for this? And that's how Doosra was born. So Doosra is today, it's a virtual mobile number that any of us can go in and purchase online on doosra.com or on the app. And you're basically given a secondary number that you can share at places where you're uncomfortable sharing your primary number. So that way, even though somebody has access, so for example, you go into a mall or a supermarket, today you give your number, you get spammed with calls and messages. So Doosra helps sort of avoid that, because your personal number does not get spammed. And, the Doosra number basically blocks everything by default, which meant that it's also in the name, right? We're bowling a Doosra to the shopkeeper. He's asked for a phone number. I've given them a phone number, but they can't reach me on that number. So that was the idea behind Doosra. We're seeing good traction for Doosra among people that are sort of privacy focused, that understand the value of data. We're also seeing significant interest from businesses as well that would like to sort of scale up their operations using a virtual mobile number platform.
Great. So yeah, I mean, so I'm sure that the Doosra will also be a great success, and if it really helps, people are really bugged with all these spams and the number of calls that come in. I'm sure this will be a very useful thing. Great. So coming to the fact that now that you have exited Media Mint and for a very good price, and Brightcom has acquired it. So what was your strategy? I mean, when you started your journey, did you plan that you will have an exit at a particular period of time, or you just let it flow and it just happened coincidentally, or or it was just unplanned?
No, I think obviously we didn't. If you look at how we started the business, right? It stemmed from the fact that ab kya kare, and all we knew was, hey, digital marketing, and that's how Media Mint started. So it didn't start with a plan ki, at some point of time we will exit. But just having seen so many different companies, and once you scale to a certain point, I used to tell a lot of my colleagues when we hit more than 400 people, I said, I've never worked at a company the size of Media Mint myself. Right. So you also start to realize that you need to bring in the right kind of people, and you need to make the right kind of take the right kind of steps to see that the company continues to grow. right? We did that over the years with the kind of hires that we have made, where people said that, okay, why do you need to hire your first sales guy so early, full time, that too, right? And I said, I've tapped out. I knew about 5 or 6 people. All 5 or 6 are working with me today. How do I grow the business beyond that, right? Similarly, we had similar interventions through the years that really helped us scale as a company. And we were profitable. So there was no real need for us to really exit as well, right? But we also realized that as you sort of look at the size and scale of the company that it is today, that if there was an opportunity for us to be able to move on, because by then I had started Zipper was going on, then I'd started Doosra as well. So there was this thing that I need to sort of consolidate my focus as an entrepreneur. And for me, the exit was one way of thinking about it. So we weren't actively looking. Of course, I'd known Suresh Reddy from Brightcom for many years, and he was sort of going through his journey and scaling up, Vibrant, Lycos, and then Brightcom, and and he was following us, right, in terms of knowing how we were growing as an organization as well, because he had a similar story, probably a decade ago. So I think that sort of one thing then led to another. We started to get talking, and it felt like this was the right time to do it, because we've also seen tremendous growth as an organization in the last 24, maybe 18 months or so. So it just felt like it was the right time to sort of take this exit.
Right. So, I'm sure that, coming, from Hyderabad, we've seen this kind of an exit, purely Indian and, takeover. I think this is the first of its kind, and there's a lot of excitement around that. Any advices or anything you would want to, tell these young entrepreneurs, as they're, about to get into their journey and their startups? So anything which you feel that is good to know for them, or,
Yeah, no, I think, when I look back at the MediaMint journey, and I think about what really led to its success, is I think a large part was not to do with us, but to do with the market opportunity itself, right? Obviously they say in good times, all boats will rise. And I think we were a good sort of journeyman, so to speak, in the move from traditional advertising to digital advertising. We just had to make sure that we don't screw anything up. Just make sure that there's enough opportunity coming along, and we have to make sure that we execute on it diligently, and which is what we did. So I think one is, pick an idea, pick a market where the size is huge, where the opportunity is huge. Because when you do that, there's a lot more. The market, when the market is large, your mistakes are a lot more forgiven, right? We've made mistakes along the way, but those mistakes kind of got a little bit, overshadowed by just the market opportunity. So I think picking a market opportunity, I think, gives you a little bit of that leeway to make mistakes. The second thing that I think is very important is, and I think this is very, very cliched, is picking your team. So for me, even when Nilima and I started, we've been working together on many different projects even before. It just happened that we were friends. We also worked together, and we happened to be life partners. So I think having very complementary sort of skills were very useful in the beginning, because Nilima she's a computer science engineer. So our first project, she was sort of doing the coding. I was doing the project management as well as the sales. So having sort of a complementary founding team, I think, is very, very useful. And the bets that we ended up taking were mostly on people. The people that we brought on board at different times really helped propel the company to the next stage. So I think these are 2 or 3 things that I would think about. One is the market opportunity. Make sure you pick a market opportunity where the size is huge. And second is make sure that the founding team, there is enough complementary skill set amongst you people. And the third is making sure that as you're scaling the company, you continue to sort of scale yourself, continue to hire the right kind of people, so that you are able to sort of have enough bandwidth to continue to focus on looking forward to the business.
So, when you said you hire right kind of people, Now, many a times we do find, the startups struggling because they don't get the right hires. So how do you, I mean, what kind of journey you went through when you say you're hiring the right kind of people? What did you look into those people? What were there some specific qualities you were looking at, or were you looking at their skill sets? What was it that, and whether they would fit into your culture of your organization?
Yeah, I think the last piece is extremely important. So all of our senior hires that we have done when there were no open requisitions. It wasn't like, hey, there is a role, so let's go hire for that role. I think now we've reached a point where we now have very defined roles, and we hire for those roles. But early on, it was more like, hey, you know what, you find a person that you align with, and that aligns with the culture of the organization. And I'm not just saying you pick anybody random off the street, right? But you've built your relationships over the years. So it's about being very, very strategic about, okay, you know what, if I were to tap into this person, would that make Media Mint a sort of a much better company, right? Regardless of that is exactly what they're doing today. Because, a lot of times we've brought in people and I said, you hire good people, we'll figure out how we're going to sort of align ourselves, because at the heart of hearts, we know that we're all doing what's best for the organization. So all of our senior leaders, Ashay, Anush came in, when we were 20 people to head operations. And I had sort of met Anush a few years before. And I told him, Anush, and I was speaking to him even when we started the company. He was in Chennai at the time. And I said, Anush, this is what I'm trying to do and all of that. So he giving me advice on the side. And then in 2012, I said, Anush, we've hit 20 people. Now it's beyond me. You need to come in and help me out. Right. And we didn't really know exactly what Anush's role was going to be. But then the moment he came in, it allowed me to continue to focus on how to bring in sort of more business, while Anush focused on operations along with Nilima. Same thing we did with our first salesperson in 2012. Then we hired a couple of senior folks on the operations side in 2015 and 16. And then Jason came in, Ashay came in, all of these guys, right? So all of them were not defined roles. We almost spoke to them, figured out, this is the role that makes sense. Let's carve something out for you guys.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, because normally people go for, hiring when there is a need, and then they look for a specific role, and then they look for a specific person to fit that role. This is very interesting. And, you actually working backwards, you have the person and then you're trying to fit the role for that. So another interesting learning from this, Aditya. Thank you so much. Now, coming to your investments, all right? So now you are also an angel investor and you've started investing in companies. So what is it that you look, maybe a 4 or 5 particular factors or, areas in that particular company, which excites you or, makes you that, okay, this is the company I would like to invest in. So what is it that you look for?
No, I think early stage funding is very much a bet on one of 3 things. One is, it's a product that you can relate to, that you can understand, right? When I say it's a product or it could be a service, but it is for a market that you understand. For me, if I came across an idea or a solution that I can relate to, that checks off one box, right? Obviously, we'll have to figure out how passionately you feel about that specific idea. The second thing is just the entrepreneur. I've done 3 investments over the years, a bunch of others where I've not really done explicit investment, but through syndicates or whatever. But it's really around early stage. It comes down to the founders. So all of the 3 investments that I've done, I knew the founders from years before, and I knew that whatever they did, I'd put my money behind it, right? So thankfully, all 3 of them have done well. One has exited, one has gone on to raise a series round. The other is doing really well. So second is the founder, and the third is what sort of market size or the opportunity. And the same thing that I applied for Media Mint, right? Just the fact that we were in the digital marketing space meant that we would do well. Is the market that they are in, is that sort of increasing in size so that even if they made mistakes, those mistakes would be forgiven. So one is relatability of the product. Do I understand it enough to add value? Second is the entrepreneur themselves. And third is the market opportunity that they're in. Is that large enough?
Right. So again, another interesting point is, of course, an entrepreneur and the trust that you have in that entrepreneur, which makes you be more comfortable when you're investing in that enterprise. Okay, great. So yes, we have a couple of, I see some questions in the chat box, and maybe, so if anybody else would, please feel free to, put your questions through. So here we are talking about, there's a question that opportunities came knocking your door. So that's really awesome. What made you call the company Media Mint?
This is also a little bit of a backward story, and if you notice that, for me, I'm a big fan of domain names. So I have Doosra.com and I had MediaMint.com. So when I was searching for a name for the company, we had first set up the official name of the company was Vuchi Media Private Limited, because you needed to set something up with ROC to get going. But the brand name, I was looking at media something, and I was doing a whole bunch of search on for domain names, and Media Mint happened to be available, and that's how we started it. It seemed like a nice name. There's a nice ring to it, Media Mint, and the way that we then justified it is that we'll make you get a fresh sort of perspective to online advertising. But that was more like you first decide the name, then you try to justify to whoever asks you for it. But it's really around the .com being available, and I think even today, but definitely in 2010, having the .com domain gave a lot of credibility, whether it's from an SEO standpoint or in general, people saying, okay, your company's name is Media Mint. The first thing is to go to the browser and check for MediaMint.com. So, and the fact that we owned it gave us a lot of credibility. So it is really a backward story where first we found the domain name, the .com, and then we said, okay, we're going to call the company Media Mint.
Okay, great. Nice. Interesting. So then the other question here is that, where were your, of course, I mean, you did answer that you focused mostly on the US. So your maximum customers were in the US, and you were absolutely focused because US was a large market. So that, of course, answers that question. But in terms of, if there were any customers in India and in the US, so did you, did you have differential pricing for it? Or was that, was there a different strategy for both the markets, or whichever other markets you approached?
No, in fact, even today we have 0 clients in India. So it wasn't a case of us being confused. And so we had one sort of rate card, global rate card, and that's what we ran off of. So even if somebody were to come to me saying, hey, can you run this campaign for us? And I'd run this in 2010 and realized that, yaar, mujhe nahi karna hai. Right, because it's riddled with a lot of challenges, cash flow issues, and I just cannot afford to run, let's say, 1 crore worth of marketing campaign and then not afford to get paid. So that way, I think we were in some ways that early experience made sure that we didn't have any confusion in which markets we were servicing.
Great. So then there's another question which says that who were your competition in 2010 and in 2021? How has the landscape changed?
No, I think so 2 pieces here. One piece is in 2010, obviously there were incumbents. There were companies that were much larger than ours. There were a company based out of Mysore that at that time already was like 600-700 people. This was in 2010. But as I said, I think the market was so large that everybody gets a piece of the pie. It wasn't a winner take all kind of, and we weren't really competing with anybody because we were too small to compete with anybody. I could not go pitch to a Google because I was too small. So I would go pitch to individual publishers saying, hey, can I handle your, ad operations? And, nobody was competing really for that business other than freelancers. So we really sort of started off with companies that were our size. And where we got lucky is a couple of companies that we worked with. They were as small as we were when they started, but they grew a lot. And as a result of that, we became the backbone of their operations. So we sort of lucked out with a couple of our early clients where they ended up, growing. So I think from that perspective, while we did have incumbents in the space, we didn't really compete because, we weren't competing on RFPs or anything with those clients. We were just too small. with those competitors. We were just too small. But at some point of time, the kind of cascading effect picked up. And today I think we are the largest independent digital marketing operations company in India.
Excellent, great. We have another question from Anita, which says that if you had to do the things you are doing differently, what would it be?
This is a tough one. I did talk about my mistakes, so I make sure that I don't do those mistakes. But at the end of the day, we had a good outcome, right? So it's hard for me to say that if I'd done things differently, would they have had a different outcome? I don't know. But other than the mistakes that I can think of, that I'd sort of correct, both for myself individually as well as some of the things for the company, not a whole lot that I can think about differently.
Right. So we have Venkat Srinivas Reddy, who says that very proud of you as a HPS alumnus. Great achievement. I am of 1970 vintage HPS by Begumpet.
Cool. So I'm also from Begumpet, Srinivas. So great to see an alum. I'm very actively involved in the alum activities, both for HPS as well as for CBIT. So it's very exciting to see that.
So Sarath Venkat is asking, being a services company, do you see the threat of companies building their internal team instead of reaching out for the services you provided? How did you address that?
Yeah, so I think I didn't mean to talk about it in the previous question, which is who are a competitor. The competitors really were internal teams. And what happened was, again, large market, seriously growing, right? So even the internal teams that people had, they were seeing high attrition because people got so many opportunities elsewhere that, the average tenure of whoever our internal competition would have been in the US, they were moving jobs. So they would stay for a year, then move on to another company and stuff like that. So the management was constantly struggling. And for them, we were the solid rock, which meant that if they worked with us, because we had sort of a good training mechanism, we had if somebody did leave, how do you sort of make sure that the operations doesn't suffer? We were taking on all of that responsibility. So at some point of time, while we would start small with them, they would realize, two things would happen. One is it would allow their existing people in their team to level up, to focus on more strategic things. At the same time, it mitigated the risk of attrition on their end, which is why companies would continue to work with that, even though theoretically they could have built their own teams.
So we have Mr. A.V. Rao, who says that excellently explain on what worked and what did not, clarity on following points, core competencies of founders, cash flows, brand protection, even at the loss of business. So he's just saying that it was a very useful talk. And
thank you.
Yeah. And then we have, so basically, just another question is that, you and Nilima have been, working together, working partners as well as life partners. So has that been a challenge, especially when it comes, to home and office and always being together? So, was it challenging, and did it, have any, differences that cropped up? How would that be mitigated? Did that result in, atmosphere at home being, different, something more on that? Because I'm sure there are many couples who are, starting together, and maybe this would be interesting.
Yeah. No, I think for me, the real, when I look back at our sort of journey together, the two things, right? One is, I didn't come from a business background, but Nilima's family did. So she understood a lot more about what it meant to work with somebody that was in a business, right? Whether it is in terms of work-life balance and stuff like that. And for us, we didn't really think about it that way. We had worked together since 2002. We had worked on one college project together, when we were students, and then worked on a whole bunch of alumni activities over the next 5 or 6 years. Then we ended up getting married, and when we started Media Mint, it was, we really didn't sweat it out in terms of what is our work-life balance. We are not going to talk about work at home. There was nothing like that. For us, we were basically living and breathing this whole entrepreneurial journey. And we were as passionate the first 3 or 4 years were just about making sure that we survive the business. So I think having that kind of frequency match in terms of seriousness of how much we want to make it I think played a very big part. The second part was just the fact that, we were in different domains. She was, she was on from a computer science background. I was more on sort of helping build the business. And then eventually Nilima moved on to other aspects of the business, which I was terrible at. Like she was handling finance and HR. And, when we had some difficult clients, she would step into the operations as well. And all of these required, significant attention to detail, which is something that I didn't have. So, I couldn't really sort of complain because, if she turned around and said, then you do this, I would have terribly failed. So I think having that complementary kind of skill set also came in very, very handy. And the third thing was having family support. So we took very conscious decisions on living very close to, we decided that we'll stay very close to either my parents in Hyderabad or her parents, right? And we ended up staying very closer to her parents. So even while during this 10, 12-year journey, we have two young sons, 9 and 6. So they were born after Media Mint started, right? My first son was born in 2012. My second one was born in 2015. And, Nilima continued to work through her entire pregnancy. She probably took a week off for both her pregnancies, right? In 2012 and 15. So, which meant that, we all knew what we were in it for. And we had the sort of the family support to also make it happen. So I think it's, it takes a lot of people to make something like this happen. And I'm really, really fortunate.
Yes. So are there any, very interesting, Aditya, because this is again another important piece, especially when, working people, and especially for women, when they have family pressures, or, how do you get the support? And many a times they sort of tend to drift and then try to focus more on family. And, especially when children, and, ensuring that their attention is, they're given the proper attention. But this work-life balance, family work-life balance, giving priorities to both, and how do you do that? Again, very interesting. And I must say hats off to both of you for having pulled it off so well, and, coming so far. And that calls for a lot of dedication, commitment, understanding, mutual trust, and also sacrifices. I'm sure, there would have been many sacrifices also. So it all works, it has to be there. Otherwise, you don't have that, it's very difficult to move forward. Absolutely. So very interesting. And yes, any further, questions, if anybody would like to ask, Suresh or anybody else here.
No, I'm good, Rashida. Thank you, Aditya. Wonderful conversation, and congratulations on a great journey.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Suresh. Thank you so much.
So I think, yeah, everybody is complimenting you. There's a lot of things in the chat I'm sure you can read through, and, Manohar is also complimenting, and then Anita saying it's very optimistic, very inspiring. Yes, it is indeed very inspiring, and, I'm sure. So what is it that you're looking forward to now that you have, still a long way to go? So what is it that is your future, and what is it that you want to do?
No, I think in that ways, I've been very fortunate, Rashida, that a lot of times when I ask, and then I've spoken to a bunch of people, and the number one reason why people don't exit a business is because they're still trying to figure out what to do next. And because of that lack of clarity, they're like, we'll continue to do this, right? And for me, in my case, I think having started Doosra, I see that there's a large opportunity there. So I want to sort of spend my next few years trying to scale Doosra up. But I think really what this exit has done is give me and Nilima the freedom to pursue what we're passionate about. There's no real sort of requirement from a financial standpoint to be able to do certain things. So you end up working on stuff that you like to. I think that's really the benefit here.
I'm sure that you would be already, a lot of people would look to you for mentoring, and, so you must be already, I'm sure you're associated with a few startup, ecosystems where you're already mentoring. And, I also look forward to, help our startups to, whenever required, to give them, certain guidelines and, how do they, especially from in terms of market reach, scalability, etc. So we will look forward to that from you as we go forward. So thank you very much. And I hand it over to our ED, for the closing remarks.
Yeah, Rashida, thank you for conducting an excellent conversation with Aditya. And Aditya, I think the insights you've shared have really inspired a lot of the people watching us, the youngsters in particular. All the best in your journey with Doosra, and I'm sure you have other opportunities and visions that you have ahead. All the best for it. And look forward to you becoming a TIE member sooner than later.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Vasu. Thank you so much for the time. Thanks, Rashida. I think some of the questions were very, made me reflect back and think a little bit. So I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to tell the story.
No, it was really inspiring, and I'm sure people have taken a lot of takeaways from this, especially in terms of what not to do, because this is something which nobody talks about. But I think this was a very important topic which you brought forth, and which came out very well. So thank you very much, and really appreciate. Thank you one and all for being here, and I'm sure this would have been very helpful. Look forward to another great session, another Thursday, and we'll come up with some more interesting stories. So stay tuned, and thank you, Aditya, once again. Thank you one and all, and have a great night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. And Sandeep, go by the trail.